Liz Truss had a press conference in which she announced that Kwasi was gone. If you were expecting her to come out and do this old mea culpa, whatever it is, like I am sorry and I am guilty and stuff like that, then that's not what this conference was. She reiterated her thoughts and ambitions along the lines of jobs, ambition for the country and growth for the country. She wants a low tax, high growth economy. Basically says that the mission remains. The target is still the same. We're just going to get there with a different pilot. She reiterated the markets need stability. Part of the problem has been the increase in the energy prices, which she reiterated her commitment to helping people out with the lecky bills. She put most of the problems on the global economy. She brought Mr. P into the discussion. I think that's a little bit... Mr. P may have started the war in Ukraine, but it's the reaction of the Western countries which have caused a lot of the problems. You can argue the morals, the rights and the wrongs. You can argue buying the gas and the oil and whatever else, fertilizers from Russia while they're fighting the war. But what you can't argue is that it's the West's imposition of sanctions and the West's refusal to buy the gas and oil from Russia that's caused the prices. If you want to take it to the end result, how far back do you want to go? They are saying that the start of it is Putin and Russia invading Ukraine. From a Russian point of view, they would mention NATO and the Berlin Wall. And how far back do you want to go? The Second World War, the First World War, the 1870 Prussia versus France. How far back do you want to take any of this? But she squarely put it on Putin, on the Biden price hikes caused by Biden and van der Leyen and Boris, all taking this stance. Now, I'm not saying it's right to take the stance. I'm not saying it's wrong to take the stance. I'm just saying by taking the stance, that's what's caused the lecky to go up. That's what's caused the energy prices to go. It's not the war per se, it's the West's reaction to the war. Now, you can argue that that's the right moral thing to do, and that's fine. And if you take that stance, then you've also got to take the stance that you're prepared to go to war economically and you're prepared to suffer the consequences of it. But you cannot have it both sides of the bread buttered. It's just not on. Anyway, she laid the blame on Putin and Biden in the price hikes because of that. She also brought into the debt ramped up by the policies adopted in 2020 when the lurgy was rampant. And that's obviously distorted the public finances and it's caused a huge debt burden to be paid for. Now, Sunak, when he was the Chancellor, and when he was running to be the PM, the leader of the party, he said, well, that was obviously the right thing to do. Nobody would disagree with that. Well, that's not true. Lots of people disagreed with the amount of money which was being pumped into COVID. Lots of people disagreed with the efficacy of some of the test and trace, some of the shutting down vast swathes of the country with lockdown. Lots of people argued against this at the time. It was not universally accepted that that was the right thing to do. It didn't receive enough debate at the time. It was poo-pooed and it was pushed to one side. All of the TV and virtually all of the newspapers were in lockstep that we had to lock things down until people realised that lots of people were losing their jobs. Lots of businesses were going under for no discernible real benefit. So she's putting the blame on the global economy, Mr. P, in the debt through the COVID. She ramped on. She says, I'm sorry to the Quasi's, he's had to go. It was just like a one-liner. She said that we need to go further and faster and we need to change and we need to reassure the markets in as part of that, I'm going to zap the reduction proposed in the corporation tax. It was scheduled to go up to 25% next year. She wanted to reduce it to 19%. She subsequently said, no, we're going to leave it at 25%. The rate's going to go up to 25%. The banks may have something to say on this, because the banks pay some sort of surcharge on bank profits. So obviously there'll be a treasury note on that and how that's going to get taken into account. But if it goes up 25 and that allowance isn't in there, then you would expect bank price shares of banks to reflect that they're going to have to pay more taxes. Sunak's view was that it's only right and fair that the companies that got a load of help during when the 2020 time was on, that they step up and pay a lot of this money back. What he seems to forget is that company profits come from companies selling items, services, goods. If half of those companies are on their knees, or they cannot get people because they can't pay them a reasonable rate because inflation is so high, then they're not going to make the profits. Obviously, that's a Sunak thing, that's not a Truss thing. And then she went on to say that, the full medium-term fiscal blah, 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 we're going to have a full, it's just going to be a super-duper one. The OBR is going to go through it top to bottom, and the OBR is it's going to be great. It's going to be the best OBR ever. It's going to be a fabulous OBR. And that this will show that the debt will be falling as the share of the GDP in the medium term. There's two parts to that equation. There's the debt and there's the GDP. Truss's philosophy is make the GDP bigger, and then that means the debt to GDP will go down even though the debt hasn't been reduced. The other line is obviously to try and reduce how big you're making the debt. And even though all of these things in the money budget, the mini budget, fiscal event, call it what you like, I don't mind, even though the debt, right, is supposed to be falling as the share of the GDP, and even though they're trying, and every government does this, every single one that comes in says there's waste in government, and we are going to have a little group of people, they're going to go around, and they're going to switch the lights off, and they're going to say we're threatened and stuff like this. And every government does it, and Truss has come in, even though it's been just a change of PM, it hasn't been a change of party. All of the government departments have been told, try and save some money. Yeah, some hope with that. So we're back to GDP. How do you make the GDP bigger? Truss was, we'll reduce taxes. By reducing the taxes, that'll increase consumption. Consumption goes up, that'll make the GDP bigger. The problem is the debt. The amount of debt which has been racked up by successive governments in the UK. Government after government. Doesn't make any difference if the government was a left-wing party with Blair and Brown, or a right-wing party with Cameron and May and Johnson, and now with Truss. The difference seems to be is that she recognises it's a problem. And Boris was just MIA. Boris said, get Brexit done. After a couple of years, it still wasn't done. The problem is that the new Chancellor that Truss is putting in as Chancellor is two things. Well, there's three. The first thing is that very few Conservative MPs actually wanted Hunt. I think he got 18 or something, so he's not universally wanted. The second thing is, and this is something which the Conservatives still haven't remedied, and that there seems to be no way around it, is that Hunt was a Remainer, Truss was a Remainer, Boris was a Brexiteer, May was a Remainer, Cameron was a Remainer. The bulk of the Conservative parties are Remainers. All of the Liberals are Remainers. All of the SNP are Remainers, and the bulk of the Labour Party are Remainers. We're now out of the EU, but people get the thought that we've got people who don't want to follow. They don't want to follow what the people in the country have requested them to do. That was the Brexit thing. Brexit's still hanging on. Years and years past when it should have done. They can't get agreement with the Euro people about Northern Ireland. That's a side issue. I'm just saying Hunt is another Remainer in a key office. The problem is trying to get people is that there's very few people in the Conservative Party that are Brexiteers. There's about 30% of the people in the Conservative Party that are Brexiteers. The rest of them are Remainers. Truss voted for Remain. She's the Prime Minister. She's now got to sort the Brexit thing out. But this is not about Brexit. This is about the mini budget, the fiscal event. She beat the drum again. World-class services. These are just... It's just word salad. World-class services. We've got world-class service, NHS. 7 million people on the waiting list. The population in the UK is 60 odd million. Let's be generous and say that that's 1 in 10 people in the country is on the waiting list. You would expect that people the older they get, the more chance that they're going to be on the waiting list. Once it gets to people like in their 70s or 60s or even in their 50s, yeah, you're looking at a ridiculous percentage of people, possibly 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 people when they get above a certain age are on the waiting list. That's the waiting list. You know, they've been seen by somebody, or they're waiting for an operation, or they're waiting to see a consultant, or they're waiting for something. So this world-class services, yeah, it's just word salad. It's the same as Boris, get Brexit done. Same as May. It's just more and more verbiage. Yeah, it's a world-class service. Do I agree that it would be better if the GDP was bigger? Yeah, of course I do. But stop this nonsensical thing that it's going to be a world-class services. It just says, but we're going to get there less rapidly. Less rapidly means slower. What? We're not going to clear the backlog. That's just going to be there like forever. Just like the debt is there forever. And then she went on, you know, the path to growth. We're bringing Hunt in, and he's respected. He's ambitious for the country. And I think he's got some good points about him. When he was younger, he formed a company. He's learned to speak Japanese. I think he was across training people. He formed some sort of company for sort of online learning. He managed to sell that to another company. He made a few bob out of it. And apparently he's one of the richest people in the cabinet. I trust them when basically saying it's the energy price guarantee that she stands by. And this is one of the major things, which is pulling the debt in the deficit. She says she's standing by that. That's going to keep going for the next 2 years, and she's not going to change that. The difference is how you pay for it. We're back to should the energy companies have been taxed on the profits, on the so-called windfall profits, or should the government take a loan out to give everybody a few £100 off their lecky bill? She then went on about supply side reform. The chances anything major happening is very small. And then next generation jobs, public this, debt that, blah 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 blah. You know, the Office for Budget Responsibility, they're going to go over this with a tooth comb. They're going to show that it's going to be great. Economic stability, national good, blah, blah, blah. Strong and sustained growth. Oh, my goodness. You know, just high all of these words into a food blender and you just come up with this. You know, to be fair, you can't expect much because she was only up there for about 8 minutes or so speaking, and that included the questions. The questions that were asked to her were puerile. Just, you know, you've sacked him, he did your bidding, why don't you go? It was the same question, just asked 4 different ways. She battered it away the same, you know, economic stability, energy price cap, blah, 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 on with it. Stronger sustained growth, determined higher growth, more prosperous, blah, 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 blah. Take any political speech from Blair, Brown, Cameron, May, Johnson. It's the same words. It's the same words. They're all saying the same stuff. Together, you know, we're going to be blah, blah, economic stability. The mission remains the same. The mission remains the same. That's what she was saying when she was asked the question. So the mission remains the same. It's just, you know, it's a different pilot going to fly the plane on the mission. But the mission's the same. It might cut back the speed of the plane, but it's the same mission. It's in the national interest. I think one of the people asked her, do you think you're credible to govern? And she just went back, economic stability. Jeremy Hunt is the new Chancellor. He believes the same as me, high growth, low tax, on the go mission, deliver the mission. It's difficult at the moment, global difficulties, but we're going to deliver the mission. One of the people asked, some ex-Chancellor guy, competence. Well, you can go back through all of these chancellors, take a look at their records. Most of them are pretty poor. So why you would ask another failed chancellor to comment on something, I'm not too sure. It was blatantly obvious after the second question that you needed a different line of questioning. But the reporters that they get in there just try and be clever and, think they're being clever by asking the same question over and over again. She wasn't going to answer it, just like she didn't answer the questions that she didn't want to. Just like none of the MPs, none of the PMs, no politicians answer questions that they don't want to. The difference is some politicians can give a rambling answer, and by the time that they've given it, you forgot what the question was. Liz Truss didn't do that. She basically just said economic stability, price guarantee for the lecky. Next question, on you go. Energy bills, long-term economic growth, universal energy help, blah, blah, blah. Political side. It's just basically what it comes down to is that Truss said the mission's correct. It's just we're getting blown off course by these external forces. Mr. P, that terrible war, and it is a terrible war. I'm not suggesting that it's not, but it's our reaction to the war which is causing the problems. Ooh, you're supporting Putin. I'm not supporting Putin, but you need to recognise that it's our reaction, the West's reaction. If you want to go that way, then you need to shoulder the blame. And you shouldn't be whinging about it if that's the case. You cannot say, we're going to put all of these sanctions on Russia. And then when you put the sanctions on Russia, you have to pay higher this or higher that. Well, you cannot have it both ways. It's just this hypocrisy of not accepting it and blaming it on Putin. It's a border dispute between Ukraine and Russia, which Britain and Europe and the Yankees have all got involved in. And that's up to them. But because they've got involved in it, they've got to accept the responsibility. The responsibility for the gas prices going up isn't Putin. It's the West's reaction to Putin. Enough said on that. I think the war's terrible. I think they should both get down, sat around and try and get some peace so the poor people on both sides, both the Ruskies and the Ukrainians, can have a bit of peace and get on with things. External forces. There's been no growth since 2008, she said. No growth. The Conservatives have been in power since 2010. The Conservatives have been in power for the last 12 years. It's an indictment on two things. It's an indictment on the Conservative Party, and it's an indictment on the system. The system in Britain is sclerotic. There's no growth. It just drifts along. There's too much debt. There's always been too much debt. Not one of the governments has resolved this problem of getting short of the debt and getting the debt on less and less and less. They tinker with it. As soon as there's the crisis, they go straight to the markets. More money. Just pump more money into the system. More debt. Let your kids pay for it. Let your grandkids pay for it. Let your great-great-grandkids pay for it. Let's just keep the inflationometer going. Let's keep that going. Let's keep inflation ticking along so that you don't realise that you're getting ripped off, that your purchasing power, that your wages are getting eroded year after year after year. She's correct in what she's saying, but it's an indictment on 12 years of the Conservatives. It's an indictment on the 2 years of Brown, who started all this nonsense out in 2008, doling out all of the money to the banks, in my opinion. But it's been allowed to go on for too long. Nobody is trying to resolve it. Debt is what's bringing the system down, in my opinion. And basically, what she tried to allude to was, she says, well, maybe I've tried to go too far too fast. Maybe I've tried to change things a bit too quick. And other people would say, well, you haven't stuck to the principles of sound money. The principles of sound money in the UK seems to be whatever's good for the banks. Whenever the banks get into problems, we'll bail them out. Wherever the banks want. We want low interest rates. Put that down, It just seems to be whatever's good for the banks. Just look at the housing market. It's so distorted. People's salaries are in no way, shape or form related to the property prices. Average property prices for over 200,000, was it 240, 250,000 pounds? Average house prices, average wages, 30k a year. 8 times. You'd have to work for 8 years and not pay any taxes for your average house. When I was younger and like in my 20s, it was sort of like 2.5 or 3 times salary. Now it's ridiculous. It's distorting the market. Debt is distorting the markets. On the positive side, I think she's pointed things out. On the negative side, I think there's the people that it's in power don't want this, and I would be surprised if this doesn't, if there isn't more attacks on her. Apparently there's a 60,000 million pound black hole where we're going to have to borrow. That's on top of what we're already borrowing, right? And just filled a little bit of the hole in, 18 billion. So I might as well say a third. She's filled about a third of the hole in by reneging, stopping on the corporation tax. Now that'll not be the end of it. This is like the classic thing where you're on the dog sleigh and you've got a pack of wolves chasing you, and you throw them a bit of meat and that stops them for a little while. The 45% tax thing, or the banker's bonus thing, that got knocked back just before the Conservative conference. That stopped the wolves for 10 minutes. Now just throwing the corporation tax, that might slow them down a little bit. I don't think so. They'll be back saying, nah, we want more. You're going to have to put taxes up, put the national insurance back up. We want that. It's the hypocrisy of it. It's great to borrow money for wars. I never seen anybody standing up and saying it's causing a big problem. I'm talking about in Parliament. It's causing a big problem, all of this money we're spending in Afghanistan. The thousands, the millions, the billions of pounds spent in Afghanistan, in Iraq. And I never seen anybody standing up and saying that. Never seen anybody saying, these 2 aircraft carriers that we're building. I never seen anybody standing up and saying, well, it's okay to get, well, that's fine, yeah, well, of course. I've never seen anybody saying, the deficit, the debt's too big to pay for that. No, it's fine to do that. It's fine to go through the business that the government's saying, if doling money out. Take a look where money goes. Take a look how we send it to. One of the classic ones that people chirp on about is foreign aid. And foreign aid got cut down by Boris from 0.7 to 0.5. We've got homeless people in the UK. We've got people who are using food banks in the UK, and we're giving money away. And I know that it's only a small amount of the budget, but think of all of the other things that's in the budget. Is it good that we help people overseas in some ways? Yeah, of course it is. But we're giving money to people that's got nuclear warheads. We're giving money to people in India and Pakistan. It's just craziness. No wonder we've got this debt. No wonder we've got all of this money. It's like having your visa bill. And as you're going into Greg's or into Mackie D's, you've got somebody sitting with a dog outside saying, can you give us a couple of quid so I can eat? And you go, okay, that'll give you a couple. Then you get your visa bill and you're only paying the minimum amount on it. You're paying for somebody else. We should be looking after the people in the UK first. Try and get people in the UK jobs. All them jobs shipped across to places. They used to build ships on the Tyne. I'm not saying it's a great job building ships, but them jobs have went somewhere else. All across the UK, jobs have went somewhere else. We've shipped jobs out by the truckload. What have we got? Low paying jobs, low skilled jobs. Hearing all of this rubbish of politicians saying that they believe in high paying jobs and stuff like that. Well, fine, okay, where are they? What are you doing about it? Maybe he's in London and places like that. Maybe he's in little places throughout the country that's happening. There's huge amounts of the country where lots of people are on low paid money. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. But the Truss, and at the end, she took the 4 questions And then she just did a Joe Biden, and she just walked off. If it's okay for Joe Biden to do that, then surely it's okay for LT to do it. Because, I never hear any of the TV people whinging about that. He just makes a statement and he just does a run. Sometimes he didn't take any questions. At least Liz Truss took 4 of the questions. She just give you the same answer to all 4. It was the same question. Should you resign? You've been bad. The markets have been bad. Blah 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 blah. She just said, well, we're going to deliver the mission. It's a different way. Global problems. We want high growth. It's the energy bills. It's the energy bills which is causing this. But I stand by my commitment to help people out with energy bills. So there you go. I think that the media people are insatiable. They're crazy, and they'll just chase this one more. It's like they've got a sense that they can bring her down. Also, she's not being helped by people in the Conservative Party. To be fair, she didn't help herself. She should have got the Office for Budget Responsibility people involved. I think what they were trying to do was make a big splash. Look at all these policies instead of putting it through the OBR people and thrashing it through and stuff. She's went for broke, and it's backfired on her. Now the OBR, maybe they did a preliminary one, and maybe people in the Treasury or the OBR said this ain't gonna float, and basically perhaps they've taken the attitude, well, bugger it, we're still gonna do it. It's partly our own sort of going too fast into it, not following, not dotting the T's and crossing the I's, and not getting the Treasury and the OBR people to have a look at it, not waiting. I think part of it was the old Queen, and that sort of sucked the life out of the country for a week or 10 days or so. And instead of possibly using that time or allowing things just to percolate through again, she's went for broke with this. Everybody will love this mini budget. Unfortunately, it's backfired, and it's just putting out fires now. I tend to think that she's going to have to give. Wait and see when Hunt gets in and see what he does, and see if he has any. What can you do though? People have said it's rubbish. Well, another couple of weeks. Got another couple of weeks, 2 weeks till the OBR. I don't know. It depends. Depends what the OBR. They must have a fair idea. If the OBR is gonna say that it's complete gumbo and it's rubbish, you need to know that, so that you can bin some of these policies. It's got to be whiter than white. It's got to be cleaner than clean when the OBR take a look at it. You might as well start binning the stuff now, and just, hands up in the air. We've got it wrong. We stand chastise. The OBR's done this. We work with them. We're diligent. Blah 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 blah. The difficulty is that the Bank of England is controlled, in my view, by the bankers. Bank of England in the country is controlled by the bankers and the finance people. They basically want a country just like on the plantation. Wage slaves, keep working. It's too expensive for to put you all in prison, and whip yous and stuff like that. So we'll make it so that you're on the treadmill for life. You want to live in a house, great. House is going to cost you £250,000 or £300,000. See how you like that. You'll not be stroppy and ask for more wages. Just be a good little person and get yourself there 5 days a week. Work your 40, pay your mortgage off in 100 years' time. That's my view. I think the banks are scurrilous it's not, it's capitalism, it's okay. The banks are doing you a good favour, lending you money. Banks make money every time they do loans and stuff like that. And yeah, they've got to cover the costs, I agree with that. And yeah, they've got bad loans and they've got to cover them. But the banks and the government and the Bank of England are in collusion over the debt. Debt, all the time, week after week, day after day, year after year. That's why the country's in the mess that it is. The volume of debt, the deficit. Nobody tries and gets the deficit sorted out. Nobody. Liz Truss really isn't sorting the deficit out. She's making it bigger. It's a gamble. She's went to the casino and said, I think I can get get the GDP bigger, faster, so that'll pay the debt off. The other people on the other side of the table are taking the opposite bets, and they say, no, we don't think you can. And the difficulty is these people control the country. These are the people in the shadows. That's a conspiracy. Get your tinfoil hat on. If you don't think it's, if you think that's a load of nonsense and that's just conspiracy talk, give me the explanation as to why we've got all, you've got to, you need the debt. All countries function on debt. That's just the way it is. Yeah, that's just the way it is. If you want the bulk of the country in servitude for life. All of the Western countries are the same. Do they have good standards of living? Yes, lots of them do. Of course they do. But you're on a treadmill, the way things are going, your houses will be 10 million. A loaf of bread will cost you 50 quid. What good is that? It hasn't done you any good at all. You're still striving for things. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. This was supposed on my soapbox. That was supposed to be about Liz Truss, and definitely the way that she handles interviews is combative. She ain't going to back down. That whether she's right or wrong, she's the principles that she's going for. She's sticking with as much as she can, but she's having to. It's the balloon game, Quasi got hurried out of the balloon. If you're the PM, you're not gonna say it was my fault. You're the Chancellor, don't you? But take a look at the PMs that's had rooks with our chancellors, Lamont and people like that, whereby it doesn't. If you have a rook with your Chancellor, it tends to fester, and the PM tends not to be there too much longer. Liz Truss thing sounds fine till you actually run the slide rule over it. You say, well, it's extra debt. Can we afford the extra debt at this time? It's a gamble. The money people say it's too big a gamble. We don't want to take it. Tell the Bank of England get round here, and so that we can hire all our duff gilts in their wheelbarrow. They'll pay above market rate for them. Basically, yes. That's it. That's a conspiracy. That's my conspiracy theory for today. I don't know. If they can limp along to the OBR, if Hunt can give some sort of reasonable suggestions what's going to happen. But you box yourself in. You've said you're going to give all this money away. You've said in my mind, there's absolutely no way in the world will they be able to come up with enough savings. If you're talking about savings, you've got to talk about stopping things. I don't know. What's that HS2? How many billions is that costing for a train to nowhere that nobody will be on in the next 10 years? It's just ridiculous amount of money for virtually nothing, so that somebody can get from, Manchester to London 30 seconds faster. It's for the amount of money that we're spending on it. It's not a realistic infrastructure project. There's far better things that money could have been spent on. But it's another one of these big white elephant. Whoa, look at this, fabulous. Whoa, HS2, look at us. The Chinese built more high-speed rail line in 1 year, I think, than the whole of Europe has, including the UK. But I'm not suggesting we go there, but I'm just saying the likelihood of them finding big savings anywhere else. Why? Because Boris's lot went through it. May's lot went through it. They all go through it. They all try and save stuff. But here, presto, we can always seem to find money to give away to other countries, to Ukraine and that. I don't know how much we're giving to Ukraine. We might only be giving them £1 billion or something like that. It mightn't be that much money in the grand scheme of things. But if you've got poor people in your own country, perhaps you should be looking after them first. Perhaps that's the way that we should be going. I'm not saying Britain shouldn't be a friend to people across the world, but I'm saying how come people are using food banks in the UK and we're supposed to be the 6th biggest economy in the world? Shit, does that mean that everybody, from 7th down, they've got even more food banks? I'm using food banks because that's a nice, easy thing. But there's lots of people in jobs that they're barely getting by. They're getting supplementary benefits, and they're having, in lots of cases, they're having to manipulate the system to get benefits out of it. There's not enough jobs that are reasonable paying out there for people to exist on in today's environment with the prices that's there at the moment. It's just not. Will that get solved? No, that's my opinion. No, it won't. They'll tinker around the edges, can talk about these enterprise zones and industrial zones and this zone and that zone and stuff like that. You're competing on a world market. The Yankees are pouring hundreds of billions into that tech, into the computer chips. You can't build anything across here. How can you compete with the Chinese on price? It's impossible. Unless the Chinese prices go through the roof and Britain becomes like a third world country. People are starving on the streets and they're prepared to work in factories and that. Do they make clothes in the UK? Hardly any. A lot of the clothing factories Far East, Bangladesh. Do we make ships? No, they're all made in Korea. iPhones? No, we never made them. Do we even make any of the things that go into these wind turbines? When you start looking around, you find that half of the bits are made in Germany or Belgium or Denmark, Sweden, places like that. What do we make? Well, the concrete for the base. Oh, but that'll provide loads of jobs. No, it won't. Provide a few jobs in the construction phase. Long term, it'll not provide that many jobs. It's just the maintenance of it. That electrical motors, by their very nature, they don't need as much maintenance as mechanical things. Take a look at the Tesla cars and electric cars. Electric engine is a far simpler engine. It's got far less moving parts. It's far cheaper to make than an internal combustion engine. The sump oil and the oil systems and the lubrications and the cooling systems, although you need a cooling system on a battery operated car. But they're far less complicated. Will there be any internal combustion cars in a few years' time? Don't know. Depends on the prices. Can get the prices of these batteries down, yeah. Anyway, time for a cup of tea.